Fantasy Rap
with Austin and Ozzy.
Oh, I just love those boys.
Hey everyone, this is Fantasy Rap, and I'm your host Ozzy.
And I'm your co-host Austin.
You can find us on fantasyrap.com. That is fantasywrap.com. Hey everybody, welcome to week 9 of the fantasy season, and we're going to start off with P's Picks. Hey everyone, we have Sutton with us today for P's Picks. Hi Sutton.
Say hi.
So what are we doing today? What is this? Is this P's Picks?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got the Tennessee Titans and the Steelers. Sutton, who would you like us to talk about?
Okay.
The Tennessee Titans?
Okay.
You say
Okay.
Titans? Yeah,
Okay.
all
Well,
right.
thank you. Can you say goodbye?
Bye.
And as you saw, P chose the Tennessee Titans. So we are going to discuss the game from last night. Did you watch the whole thing?
Most of it, yeah. I thought, the stat line doesn't suggest it, but I thought Will Levis actually looked pretty good,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. He made some nice throws. Got stuck in a little bit of trouble at every once in a while.
Yep.
Trying to wait and find the right time to make a throw.
Yeah.
But that pass that he had across the middle, was that to Hopkins?
Yeah, he had one where the linebacker was right in
his hip
back
pocket.
hip,
Yeah.
and Levis put it perfectly
Yeah.
there in the middle. Yeah, that must have been the one. So.
Yeah, he was 22 of 39 for 262 yards, one interception, one rush for 2 yards. I was impressed too.
Where that stat line doesn't show, obviously what he did last week, and that pick. I would have liked to probably see him go elsewhere on the field with that throw because he had just thrown in that exact same spot. But again, rookie trying to win a game for your team.
Super strong arm.
Oh yeah.
But you're right. Every once in a while he would, he'd telegraph his passes.
Yep. Yeah.
But a couple of those I watched as, a guy would flash open, and most of the time you see a young quarterback throw that ball too hard, and it'll be over the guy. It'll be, just too hard. And he sat there and he floated a couple of them in. And you'll notice the third person I've got, or the fourth person I've got on the list, is Kyle Phillips.
Yeah.
So let's start with Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry caught 3 of his 4 targets for 27 yards, had 17 rushes for 75 yards and a touchdown. Not the type of game, although they were playing from behind at that point late in the game. You kind of hope that he would have more than 20 touches.
Yeah, he, typical Derrick Henry where, 2 rushes, he'd get 2 yards, 3 yards. And then he'd rip a 9-yarder, or, he had a couple, not huge rushes. I think most of his receiving yardage came on that
one play,
that
like 23
pass.
yards.
Yep, that screen pass. It is nice, obviously, being a Henry manager, having him in PPR.
Yeah, I'm playing against him, thanks.
Yep. So, he, typically on Thursday nights, he usually goes crazy.
Well, and that's why that 17 carries, had that not been such a close game, you probably would have seen more like 26, 28, 30 carries.
Yeah.
And he would have been, if Tennessee would have been ahead.
Yeah, I didn't, Tajay Spears was out there, but he didn't really take a whole lot away, from Henry.
He had some nice runs, too.
Yeah, I think, whether this will be the last year that Derrick's in Tennessee, come the off season, because obviously, there was talks of teams reaching, I think, like Baltimore and the Cowboys for some reason were the 2 teams that the name I kept hearing the most.
Is he a free agent after this year?
That I'm not sure.
Okay.
That I would have to take a peek into that. But, he's, for running back, he's old. He's got a ton of mileage on him. He doesn't look quite as explosive,
Right.
obviously.
Although he looked good on the touchdown.
Yeah. Just willed his way in. You know.
And then kept his whole body at 6 inches above the ground.
Yeah.
So, moving on, we have Hopkins caught 4 of 11 targets for 60 yards, 1 rush for 5 yards. Certainly not what, if you're a Hopkins owner, like I said, did you play him?
I did after last week. I'm like, well, I mean, I know it was only the 3 or 4 catches or 3 catches or whatever and the 3 touchdowns, but I mean, he's 11 targets. Levis looks for him.
He does.
And Levis has a big arm, so, kind of view that a little bit like Shaheed from the Saints, where if one of those big ones connects, Hopkins has a huge game.
True.
It was frustrating, though, because most of those targets came in the first half.
Right.
Along with his catches. And then the second half, they were trying to run a lot of just sideline, like go routes and, just some like deeper ones. A lot of times coming off the ball, Hopkins would come off slow, and then when he came into the break, that's when he would, kind of try to accelerate. It was just, it looked a little weird out there.
It did. He was not getting separation. None of the receivers were getting separation downfield on the outside.
Yeah.
Which you're not going to, you put a quarterback in a position where he kind of has to make that throw, hoping that you're going to get some separation, and then it never happened.
Yep. Yeah. So I'll take the 11 targets. The one rush was like a wide receiver screen, but it was behind. So technically, yes, a rush. Where it came behind, and he had to run all. Yeah, he was going to throw it to Derrick Henry,
and then had
which
to actually,
that would have been awesome for my team. I would love that.
But Derrick was double covered.
Yep.
So he came all the way back around and actually picked up yardage when he should have lost.
The fact that you got 5 yards out of that, I was like, ooh, all right. Cool.
Right. So the last one I actually put on here because everyone else seemed to have 1 or 2 catches.
Yeah.
There was no one else who stood out other than Kyle Phillips.
Yeah, late that last drive and a half, like the last drive or 2 drives, Okonkwo kind of got in, he had a couple catches, had a couple targets, but he's been a huge disappointment this year too.
Right.
But yeah, Phillips, every time you looked up when he was catching it, he was wide open in his own.
Yeah.
Right on the sideline.
Yeah, the one against Patrick Peterson. He just, he got past him, got out to the side, made a great leaping catch on that. This is like their 4th receiver.
Yeah,
is what they were saying. Yeah. And I've never heard of him.
Yeah,
and
he makes a catch here and there,
right?
But he'll throw a good downfield block for somebody, and then they bring his name up. But,
yep. So he was 4 or 5 for 68 yards. Impressive in the sense that if Will Levis is going to make it, he's got to have those guys that he can trust. And it almost looked like Kyle Phillips was a guy that he could trust more than just about anyone else out there. Ran good routes, which is great. You rarely hear about these guys that, they're the 4th option.
Yeah.
And here he is having not a great game, but that's what 17 yards a catch.
Yeah, he was making these plays at crucial down and distances too.
Yeah, I think a couple of them at least were 3rd down catches.
Yeah, so Tennessee's defense, I played Tennessee's defense last night because a banged up Kenny Pickett. Figure Tennessee could get a couple sacks, maybe a pick. Nothing. 0 sacks, I think. No picks, no fumbles. Tennessee was doing the old Green Bay. It's 3rd and 7, so we'll give them 8 yards.
Yep.
Tennessee just could not close out any of those drives for Pittsburgh, and it was very frustrating to watch.
Right. Although they did in the first half.
Well, I think it was the first drive for Tennessee, and Pittsburgh had 5 penalties on the first drive for Tennessee, I want to say. That kept that drive alive, and then they got down and kicked a field goal. But they threw a stat up, and it said that, average penalties a game for Pittsburgh was 5. And they had 5 in one drive.
Yeah.
It was PI, defensive holding, hands to the face. There was like an offsides one, so it was really the first like drive or two for both teams was really sloppy.
Right.
But yeah, like I said, I mean, Tennessee, the defense didn't really help out the offense at all with giving them any short fields or,
right.
Getting a good turnover to help, some momentum. So,
yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think Will Levis will be okay. I think anybody in Tennessee I think you'd have to be stupid to put Tannehill or, I don't know. I think you just got to see what happens. He's washed. He looked horrible before his injury.
Yeah.
Their offense looked I mean, they brought it up last night. Levis actually brings a threat to the defense of a deep pass.
Right.
Therefore, I mean, Derrick Henry had his, fourth consecutive 75-yard plus, 75 yards or more, rushing performance because he's not getting just, they're not stacking the box against him.
Right.
So.
And that was the other thing that impressed me about Levis was when they brought a couple of blitzes and he knew that he has to throw right back into the blitz, and boom, there was a quick out to Hopkins. That a couple of different plays where he hit the guy that he should have hit when he was getting that blitz coming.
Yeah.
So
the only thing I think I would like to see from Levis, and I sent it to our group chat, was to me looked like he was trying to do a little Rodgers where he doesn't set his feet and it's just kind of that little flick. I mean, the dude's got like we said, he's got a cannon.
Yes, he does.
So he can play around with that, but it would be nice sometimes to see him set his feet because I think Tajay Spears should have had a wide open touchdown. Came out and he was coming back and he turned and he kind of stumbled backwards.
Yeah.
And that was one where Levis, I think, it would have been close, but he did that little flick and it came over.
The problem is that he threw it while he was running the route.
Yeah.
He didn't throw it after he had turned around and was moving backwards. That's more of if Spears doesn't, shuffle his feet and catch his feet and kind of fall, he does catch that ball.
Yeah.
I mean, I saw more mistakes by Pickett than I did by Will Levis on passing downs because Pickett had a guy going across on a crossing pattern, and that might have been one of the targets to Pickens.
Mm-hmm.
And he I mean, the thing was about 3 yards high, and no one was there. I mean, the guy was trailing, but as you looked at the field in front of him, it would have been, here's the ball, now I'm going for at least 40.
Yeah, which, fine by me because I was playing against Pickens last night, so...
Okay. Let's go to our picks of the week. So our quarterbacks for this week are Mahomes, Allen, Hurts, Jackson, Burrow, and Carr, as far as CBS's rankings of the top 6. So I am going to go Dak at Philly. Philly actually gives up the third most points to quarterbacks so far this season.
Sam Howell hung
38 in our league.
Almost 400 yards and 4 touchdowns last week? 4? Something like that.
I don't remember 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So I'm at a point where, beginning of the year, if someone would have said Sam Howell's going to eat up Philadelphia
twice.
Right.
I mean,
I would have.
The first one, he wasn't as good, but the first matchup, he played really well too.
Yeah, and if you told me that Philly was going to be the third worst team against quarterbacks, I would have laughed.
Yeah.
But
I think they've lost a couple people on their back end too. Kind of like Green Bay's situation where starting corners and what are out on IR or healing from injuries. So
corners
they're missing
safeties and
so they're missing their that back their defensive line is still with Jordan Davis the rookie. Oh man, that dude's a monster in there. But and Dak has come off of like back to back like top 5 fantasy quarterback.
Yeah, it just the only thing that there's one big thing that holds Dak back on a weekly basis if Dak doesn't play well. Mike McCarthy. So it just depends on, if Dak gets to play Dak's game, Dak's going to have a big
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, Dak playing his game, turns into CeeDee Lamb having 12 catches for 100 and something yards and three touch. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, and I think this should be yeah. So I mean, I think this should be a good game too. I mean, Dallas's defense is, in plus matchups, they're really good, and I mean, I think Philly's still doesn't quite look like what they did last year.
Right.
You're starting to see it with the hurts to AJ Brown.
Yes,
AJ Brown's been out of his mind the last couple of weeks.
Right.
So
I mean, the other thing to look at is last year, Philadelphia was winning by halftime.
Yeah.
Big.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to throw the ball. They couldn't run to get back into it. So Philly didn't have to put 8 in the box.
Yep.
They put 5 or 6 in the box, and they'd cover more, and it was harder to throw on them.
Yeah.
This year, they're not. There have been games they're losing at halftime.
Yeah.
And when that's happening, guess what? There's going to be a more well-rounded. They're going to have to play an honest defense as opposed to the defense they played last year.
Yeah.
So I think that plays into it a lot.
Yeah,
also.
for sure. He was a participant today, and sounds like he's going to play. I'm going to go mostly just matchup based. Deshaun Watson against Arizona. David Njoku's come on a little bit here in the last couple of weeks as well.
Injured though.
Yeah.
Questionable.
Yeah, so I mean, if he goes, he's just an athletic freak. So
yeah.
He can do whatever he wants. I mean, Amari Cooper's still getting decent targets with PJ Walker. Just the touchdown and a trip to the end zone and the yardage just haven't been there because of whatever limitations Walker might have. I mean.
So do we know who's starting for Arizona?
It's going to be Clayton Tune.
Okay, so
Tune, I think.
So
the only thing,
Kyler isn't back or isn't ready to play.
I don't know if they've come out and said it yet. I did hear this morning that Gannon, the Cardinals coach, wouldn't say for sure.
Okay.
So,
I mean,
there's it's a non-zero chance that Murray comes back this week.
So Clayton Tune plays and. They get up. Cleveland gets up by 2 touchdowns early.
That's the only thing, and could be one of those could be a defensive touchdown.
Right.
So that's the only thing. Is that their defense could just put essentially have the offense just on the shelf basically.
Right.
I mean, they're
So, and I'm not trying to pick on your pick because
like
I like
said,
it.
There's
if
Gannon,
Watson.
Yeah, Gannon didn't commit to one.
I mean, you're better off. You're better off with Kyler Murray, I think.
Yeah,
playing because it'll probably be a better game.
I'd have to double check. Sounds like James Conner is back healthy. Sounds like he's going to play this week too. So, you get a healthy Kyler Murray, healthy James Conner. I mean, Cleveland's defense still is just ridiculous, but
it could be a lot closer.
Could be
game.
A lot closer
right.
to force Cleveland to at
right.
least maintain that lead
right.
and not just sit on, manage to a
right.
win.
Yep. So next we've got the running backs, and it's Breece Hall, Alvin Kamara, Mixon, Barkley, and Mostert. Those two are both questionable, Barkley and Mostert, and they had Derrick Henry on there. And I put him on there mainly because, I don't want to take away from us having people to choose from.
Yeah.
And he was a top 6. I don't think he'll end up in the top 6 with what he did. Not a horrible game, but, that's 2.7, 9, 10.2, 16.2. It's not a bad week, but it's not a great week.
Yeah, just shy of 20 in our PPR. So.
Yep. So I went with Eckler against at the New York Jets. Jets give up the 13th most points to running backs.
Okay.
So here's a guy who, the Jets, they seem to be winning somehow.
I think they're on like a three game win streak right now. Something. Yeah.
Yeah. But they do it ugly. I mean, they're not a high scoring
games.
Pardon me?
Just got to win games.
Right. Not a high scoring potent offense.
Yeah.
They've got a good defense, but they're giving up points to the running back.
Mm-hmm.
If if the Chargers get up, I have a feeling you're going to see a lot of Eckler.
Yeah.
You're going to see Eckler regardless.
Yeah, and you saw kind of a vintage Eckler stat last week. He had like 6 catches for 100 yards.
Right.
He had 100 receiving yards last week. So, and I think he's starting to get back to 100% as well, because he did miss that time with the ankle and then, hadn't looked quite right. So, you hope this is just one more week where he can keep, he's got to make up for that time he missed. Because he's a big fantasy guy. He's part of one of the shows. As well.
A few weeks ago, he was playing against himself or something like that.
Yeah,
that's got to be weird.
That would suck. Yeah, I think the NFL is going to do a random investigation on that one.
Yeah, because there's gambling.
Yeah. Well, it was. Side note: the gambling thing. Look, scrolling through TikTok, and it's like a slideshow of just random NFL players, and one of them was where did Quintus Cephas go? Former Wisconsin receiver for the Lions.
Yeah.
I knew he had gotten in trouble for gambling, but it's indefinite.
Oh, I thought his was a 6 game. Was his indefinite?
I think it was indefinite.
Okay.
Unless
that's right.
Unless it hadn't been updated. But,
that's right. Jameson was.
His was 8. Then I think he got it reduced.
Yeah,
I'm
something
pretty sure
like
he got
that.
it reduced.
And then there were 2 others that were indefinitely. And the funny thing is, you sit there during the commercials and they're talking about gambling. Mm-hmm. The NFL, promoting gambling.
Are DraftKings and
yeah. And yet you complain that players are gambling. Yeah. So don't get me started on that. I still think that Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame.
I agree. So I am gonna go match up with a defense that just let go of probably 2 of their best players. So I'm going to go Ramondre.
On the defensive line?
Yep. Ramondre Stevenson versus Washington. He's been underwhelming, I think, for a lot of people this season.
In 2 of my leagues.
Yeah, because he was taken 2. He was a guy, he was getting taken in the second round.
Yeah, I took him as the 32nd pick.
Yeah, especially if, for some reason, if you had drafted before the Zeke signing.
After. But.
But if you had, you're like...
I was still looking at last year.
Yeah.
He had a great year.
Yeah.
And regardless, if it's one of those things like... So how is Dalvin Cook doing in New York?
Oh, it's horrible.
Okay. He never sees the field anymore, or rarely does.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same type of thing. You've got and not that Dalvin Cook can't be 1,000-yard rusher for a team. Mm-hmm. If you're not going to give him the reins and let him go, and you're going to say, well, it's Breece Hall's job, much like I thought that they would do with Ramondre. I thought they would say, it's his job. Mm-hmm. We will spell him every once in a while with Zeke. Well, Zeke seems to get more like 50-50 or 60-40.
Yeah, and I think
40-60.
Yeah, and I think Belichick's been more of a culprit than he kind of taken on the Shanahan, by committee approach. And Belichick's been horrible. You go back to the Danny Woodhead Patriot days.
Yes.
Him and Stevan Ridley, and then you had James White and all those guys. At the one time you had 3 Patriots running backs, LeGarrette Blount. When he had all those touchdowns.
Yeah. You had no idea who to play.
Exactly.
Yeah. I've said year after year, I'm not going to take someone from their offense as a running back, and here I did in 2 of my leagues. So,
yeah, and I think if you're in a tight pinch, a bye week or something crazy like that, it's ugly and nasty, and you're going to feel bad. But I think Mac Jones might be an okay streamer this week.
Okay.
Like I said, it's nasty and it's ugly.
It's nasty and ugly.
Yeah, so I think Stevenson, I think if this is going to be a week for him to finally,
I hope so,
explode, and show that he can be one of the top fantasy running backs, because really his thing is through the air, and he just hasn't really been getting that much. They had the one week where they actually got him involved. He had 6 catches, and I think that might have been his best fantasy output,
Yeah.
and just for the team too, it helped him out a lot. So, like I said, Washington moving, Chase Young and Montez Sweat, those are two pretty big holes in that defensive line.
Right.
So,
yeah, I'm hoping you're right, because I have that guy in my 3 leagues, Christian.
Run CMC.
Yeah, run CMC, that guy. Just kidding.
Yeah.
And he's obviously on a bye week, so I could really use Stevenson doing something this week. Let's move on to our wide receivers. And, actually, I with the running backs, I missed putting Derrick Henry in. I didn't do it intentionally, but I did on the wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Hill, Chase, Brown, Diggs, Pickens. Wow. Pickens had 2 catches in 5 attempts for -1 yard. So I was trying to kind of show you what CBS comes up with as their selections. Wow. It's kind of like the 2 weeks in a row where we saw Isaiah Pacheco. Yeah. And Isaiah Pacheco was horrible.
Those were pure matchup based too for Pacheco.
Right.
And I think maybe the same for Pickens. I mean, Tennessee, if you were, their run defense was not very good last night, but that was the way you beat them, was you threw on them. But I mean, somehow CBS missed that Deontay Johnson was back, because he had a pretty good game.
Right.
And
so I was that's why I left Pickens in. Like I said, I missed Henry. Mm-hmm. I left Pickens in to make light of the fact that CBS's number, and that's, people get upset. Well, I don't want to say upset, but I've heard, the guys that are doing the podcast fantasy wrap don't always put out the best choices in their pick of the week. Mm-hmm. Well, our picks of the week come after the top 6 are off the board.
Yeah.
So we're trying to come up with.
We're not taking layups here.
Right. I mean, I could easily say, Tyreek Hill is going to have a huge game. Yeah. We're going after those players are already selected. Mm-hmm. So just like they blew up messed up on Pickens, sometimes we're going to miss also.
Yeah.
So the last one that they had was CeeDee Lamb, obviously after last week. Mm-hmm. So I am going to go with, and I don't know if I should be or not because of our conversation a week ago.
Yeah.
I'm going Adam Thielen against Carolina. At Carolina against, who they playing? I forget who they're playing. But whoever they're playing against gives up the 13th most points to wide receivers, and gave up over 23 points to Rashid Shaheed last week. So I like Thielen's chances here, although you said, they've switched out who's calling the plays, how they're doing things. Thielen was not overly impressive this past week because he didn't get the same number of looks that I think we've seen throughout the first part of the season.
Double-digit targets every week. So yeah. I mean,
so I'm hoping that you're wrong.
Me too, because Thielen, again, a guy who feels like he's been around forever, and everybody kind of wrote off, Carolina, rookie quarterback, Miles Sanders has been bad and very underwhelming. I mean, banged up here, but, you figured this was going to be like Thielen's going somewhere to retire,
right off into the sunset by the end of the season.
Fiery canoe, getting that Viking funeral.
Right.
But Thielen, he's been, really, fantasy-wise, probably he's been like a top 5 receiver.
Top 10.
He
was, I think
he was really burned.
I think he was 9th.
Yeah.
Before last week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
9th, point-wise. Yeah.
Crazy with some of these, just crazy, because my pick of the week for receiver is T. Higgins.
Yeah.
That's that same thing. Guy underwhelming and then hurt, Obviously that whole Bengals situation at the beginning of the year, with Burrow being injured, and they just looked horrible because of that. They had a tougher schedule. It opens up here in the second half a little bit for them. Buffalo's defense, and well, granted, now they just, beefed up the defense a little bit with their trade to get Rasul Douglas from our Packers. That's a guy, Rasul can make some plays, and, he can definitely add, a little bit more stoutness to the Buffalo defense that hasn't been that impressive this year. I mean, they've been burned. So I think a lot of the focus is obviously going to be on Jamar Chase, as it should.
Right.
And T. Higgins can hopefully justify his draft price tag, because he was again I was seeing him go in the late second, early third, pretty much everywhere.
Oh yeah. He was,
and he has not delivered.
I am almost positive. Well, I shouldn't say that. I think he was gone in the first 32 in our league.
Yeah.
Now it's funny that you compare Higgins to Thielen. Yes, they're both great receivers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, one is on the back end of his career, and one is ready to sign his first non-rookie contract.
Go get that money.
So there's like 5-6 years difference between them. So,
I was just saying it's crazy that Thielen's a top 10 receiver,
right?
And
Higgins
he was super late in drafts, and Higgins was second, third round. In that top, probably. If you went outside the top, probably 40 in your draft,
right?
That was not aligning to what.
Yeah, I'm trying to think because I took Waddle with pick 33.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if I don't think Waddle would have gone before Higgins.
I think that one would have been kind of depending on who was there in that spot picking, that would have just been kind of who they prefer.
No, it was me.
But I'm just saying, I know, but
I probably would have preferred Higgins.
Yeah.
Now I'm glad I didn't take him presently.
Yeah.
But I don't recall. Because they're both the second choice on excellent passing teams.
Yeah.
So I don't really remember which way I was thinking.
This should be a potentially high scoring game. since his defense has been pretty good, but they're playing Buffalo.
Well, the other thing about Buffalo is they're really lousy against the run.
Yeah.
As we've seen.
Yeah.
And nothing wrong with this, because if they can get to a point where the run is looking good, then the receivers are more open.
Mixon's another guy who had been kind of, for his draft price, had been pretty, underwhelming kind of.
Right.
And he blew up this last week.
And he's listed as the third matchup.
Yeah.
Right.
So that rolls right into I'm agreeing with you this week.
Yeah.
It's the best matchup.
So let's go to tight ends. We've got Kelsey, Andrews, Taysom Hill. I still think he should be a quarterback. Dallas Goedert, Njoku. I think, is Goedert injured? Njoku is questionable. And then they've got Pitts. So we both chose Dalton Kincaid against Cincinnati at Cincinnati. Cincinnati gives up the most points to tight ends.
Yep.
Kincaid is the only. Well, now that what's his name, 88,
Knox.
Dawson Knox is injured.
Mm-hmm.
Kincaid is the guy. Gosh, I didn't know that. DK and DK.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there you go. Knox was out, and all of a sudden you see, Bill's offense. They're, obviously Kincaid had the, nice yardage, they had his touchdown that everybody was, Josh Allen went and grabbed the ball for him. They've got a good connection there, and this is the most exploitable, defense for tight ends.
Right.
So you figure, you would assume that he's going to have another really nice stat line.
I'm hoping. I have him.
What we saw from him last week is exactly the reason why Buffalo drafted him.
Exactly.
That field stretching, seam stretching,
And you sat there. It's funny because I sat there the first 6 weeks of the year going, he's not doing what I expected he would do. I expected last week to be kind of what he did, not with the touchdown every week, but being involved in that offense, and he wasn't, and I dropped him. and I picked up Ertz. And all of a sudden, Ertz gets hurt. Knox gets hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Kincaid has a decent game with, I think, like 8 or 10 targets and 80-some yards. And I'm just hoping and praying that I could get him off of waivers.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily, someone took McBride before him, and I got him back on my team.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think once Kyler comes back, I think Kincaid and McBride will be pretty close. I mean, McBride had that huge game last week in the worst matchup, defensive matchup,
right.
Too. So that's, encouraging to see from him.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Kincaid's he should get it done this week. Like I said, this should be, hopefully, this would be a pretty cool to see, like a, one team, one or both of them scoring in the upper 40s, obviously it'd suck for fantasy defenses, but it'd be nice to see a huge point total.
It's something that we haven't seen a lot of lately, the big scoring games.
Yeah, a lot of them have been in the, total points in like the low 40s.
Right. I mean, it started out there was very little offense the first 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
Then we saw, a 70 to whatever game
or something.
Yeah. And then 40 to, and the points were just, some guys were up there having just monster games. And I mean, granted, CeeDee Lamb had a lot of points last week, but you aren't seeing the 42 to 37 games this year. It's just, it's odd.
Yeah, there are a lot of, I think a lot of matchups like this week, they're with both teams with losing records. So it has just been a weird year. Like I said, that coming into week one with just the projections in our league, full PPR, normally you got a handful of teams that are projected in the 120s. And if you're projected in the 120, 120 to 125, your team's pretty dang good.
Right.
And, I think it's probably been couple of weeks since I've seen a team in the 120s, obviously bye weeks and injuries and stuff, but it has just been kind of a weird year where it started out kind of slow. So I think that first week there were like 30 fewer touchdowns than last season or something within that first week. So it's surprising. I mean, the defenses, it's kind of like when they say in baseball, the hitters, is it always the hitters are better than the pitchers early on because the pitchers haven't had the time to build up the stamina to go extended periods of time. So you're, and that's what it kind of seems like here. It seems like the points aren't quite there. The defenses were better than the offenses, and it's weird because I don't remember a season when it started out as slowly as it has this year. Yeah, I mean, you've got offenses that everybody assumed were going to be, huge.
Right. I mean, Cincinnati was one of those that started out so slowly.
Miami, has been the one team carrying the league, for points. But Cincy with Burrow, even the Eagles start out.
You look at New England and how bad they've been and how few points they've scored on the year. I mean, just stuff like the Packers, the Jets, the Giants. Just normally, those are some of the teams that are scoring, and now they're not.
Yeah.
So it's just a weird thing. I mean, you've got some of your teams that perennially. I've never seen. Well, you don't see the Titans score a ton. You don't see Pittsburgh necessarily score a ton. You don't see New Orleans scoring a ton, and they're not.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much what you'd expect from them. So moving on to our Love 'em, Flip 'em, Leave 'em segment. I decided to go with tight ends again, and I went with Hockenson, Goedert, and Kmet. And I don't, Hockenson, it's hard to say what his value is now. Because with Kirk Cousins gone, does his value tank?
Obviously, it takes a hit. You got Jaron Hall, this rookie Jaron Hall, like 4th-round rookie this week because Dobbs is coming in to learn the system. So after this week, I think Hockenson should be okay. He's not gonna, the ceiling that he had with Kirk Cousins is gone. But I think his floor is still fine.
Well, and the interesting thing is, so how many targets were we seeing out of Ertz?
Oh, there's a couple weeks he had 10 targets.
And how many points was that before or after the trade? I'm trying to think. The trade deadline was Tuesday, right?
Yep.
So what did he do this past week? Well, he went to Trey McBride.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's if Dobbs comes over, I mean, he was utilizing his tight ends better than just about anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Does Hockenson lose anything?
I think he loses a little just because, the arm talent of Kirk Cousins isn't there. Still,
right, but
I haven't really heard anything yet about Justin Jefferson, kind of his time frame now too, because
I had seen
they had originally said, it's the 4 weeks for sure.
Right.
But then after that, it's just kind of a gray area right now because
Right.
there was a lot of the talks with, if Kirk goes, JJ's probably going to go, or, he'll just sit out, or be injured kind of thing,
I think he wants Kirk back.
Oh, yeah.
It would behoove him to play as well as he can, obviously. I mean, who wants a guy that openly says, I'm not going to play.
Well, yeah.
I'm not going to try. I mean, most teams don't like players like that, including the ones that they go to.
Look at Claypool, how he got booted out of Chicago because he just didn't care.
What a wasted second-round pick that was.
And they might have wasted a second one with the Sweat trade.
Yeah. Well,
because he can just say...
That's what he said so far. He said, I'm not signing a new deal yet.
Yeah.
He wants to see what his value is.
Mm-hmm.
So Hockenson, even if there's less arm strength, I think that less arm strength or passing downfield to guys like JJ and Addison brings Hockenson even potentially higher.
Yeah.
What do you think about Kmet with when Fields comes back?
I think he'll be the same. Where 1 week he just had a pretty big week. Was that last week or week before? I think it was this past week, didn't he? He had 10 targets.
Could be.
A handful of catches, decent yardage, 80, 90 yards or something. But this is same thing he did last year. He had those 3 weeks with 2 touchdowns each week, and then that 4th week, he's a tight end that can get you 0 points.
Right.
I mean, he can lay a goose on your roster, or he'll score 2, or he'll score 15. There's really
so he's your Kittle. He's your poor man's Kittle.
Yeah, basically. Cheaper version of. Yeah.
And we all know how I like Kittle. So
yeah.
What about Goedert for you?
He's been really weird this year. I mean, he had that huge game a couple weeks ago, and that was, I don't know if he was saying stuff, talking to Jalen Hurts or the team,
I'm here.
Getting nothing. Yeah, exactly. And that's when they were struggling a little bit.
Right.
The same thing. They were in really close games, and he's still in the close games wasn't getting utilized. So
who do you love?
I think I'd probably have to stay with Hockenson.
Just because of...
Yeah, I think Dobbs, like we said, I mean, he loves to target his tight end. Like I said, I think the ceiling takes a bit of a hit for Hockenson, but I think his floor is safe.
I would tend to agree. Would you flip Goedert then?
Yeah, I think you would.
Because I don't think Kmet holds as much value regardless of what happens. I mean, unless you knew that you were going to have weeks 13 through 18 last year for the rest of this year, I don't think I would want Cole Kmet on my team.
No, and if you're in any sort of league that kind of half knows what they're doing, if you have Kmet and after last week you're sending a trade out with him involved, that other manager is going to go, okay, he had a big week. He's trying to, which I don't blame you for trying. You gotta do what you gotta do.
Right.
But like I said, I think it'd be hard to get much for Kmet.
Yeah, Goedert is definitely
he's
more value.
He's part of he's on the Eagles team. He's part of the Eagles offense. I mean, that, like I said, that week that he went huge could happen. The chances of it I don't think are that great, but I think if the Eagles want to try and figure out a little bit, like I said, obviously that A.J. Brown connection has been working really well. Devonta Smith had a good week last week as well. That final piece, I think, is going to be getting Goedert, at least getting him 5 targets a game, 6 targets a game.
Right.
He especially in the red zone, because he's a huge, that's kind of how he came on to being one of the top 6 fantasy tight ends, is he was catching quite a few touchdowns when he was a little younger. So.
Right. And if you remember, there was a trade in our league, our dynasty league this week, which had Goedert for running back Kyron Williams.
Oh yeah.
Which surprised me that someone was willing to give up on. Isn't Williams a rookie?
Kyron, no, a second year.
Second year player
last year.
Okay.
Yep.
Second year player who's a starting running back.
I mean, he was still on IR, but
yes.
I understand, especially in Dynasty.
Right.
Just the age difference too, and the Rams, even with Kyron out, Darrell Henderson's been relevant for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Rice Freeman scored. They're still using the running backs, so you would assume that when Kyron comes back, especially with Stafford banged up, you think he's questionable this week.
Yeah, very questionable.
They're gonna obviously have to lean a little more on the run game. So,
gosh, they probably won't be able to run very much against the Green Bay defense.
Yeah. Darrell Henderson this week, I think, is gonna have a pretty good week. I was looking at him for my starts, but he was so far down. I'm like, oh man. And the matchup's good.
Oh, the matchup isn't
great.
good.
It's great.
I think you or I would look like more than serviceable running backs.
I could probably average 2 yards carry.
I mean, I could probably break a hip and make $1 million and go for 75 yards if I could run that far. It's like I always tell people. I just finished running a marathon. Took me 23 years, but I'm finally done.
You got the distance down.
So, with that, we'll leave it as a love 'em Hockenson, flip 'em Goedert, and leave 'em Kmet.
Yeah.
And if you want to go on our Instagram page and give us your ideas on who you would do that with, who you'd love, flip, or leave, we'd like to hear it. We've had a few people do that in the past, and always makes for some interesting discussion.
Yeah.
So, otherwise, that's all we've got for this week.
Yep.
And we're going to actually be doing a Monday podcast next week, and that will be the only podcast we do next week. And then we will follow it up with the following Tuesday.
Yep.
So, otherwise, I am Ozzy.
And I'm Austin.
Have a great week.
See you.